Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming. And the rugged red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
You probably know that every year on November 11th, Americans celebrate Veterans Day to honor the millions of men and women who have served or are serving in the nation's armed forces. But bet you didn't know the whole story behind the holiday. For starters, it wasn't originally called Veterans Day, but Armistice Day, to commemorate the truce signed between the Allies and Germany in World War I on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918. The first Armistice Day in the U.S. was celebrated on November 11th, 1919. All business was suspended for 2 minutes starting at 11 a.m., and parades and public gatherings were held to commemorate the occasion. Later, America also began honoring its unknown soldiers on Armistice Day, a tradition that continues today. At 11 a.m. every Veterans Day, a color guard ceremony represents all branches of the military at the Tomb of the Unknowns in Arlington National Cemetery. In 1954, the name was changed to Veterans Day, following a national campaign to have the day honor all veterans, not just those who served in World War I. And did you know, for 7 years, Veterans Day was actually celebrated in October? In 1968, Congress moved Veterans Day to the fourth Monday in October so that government employees could enjoy a long weekend. But in 1975, President Gerald Ford returned Veterans Day to November 11th due to the historical significance, and that's where it sits on the calendar today. And do you know the difference between Memorial Day and Veterans Day? Both of them honor those men and women who have served in the military, but Memorial Day honors America's war dead, while Veterans Day honors all American veterans, living and dead. The U.S. Census Bureau estimates that there are currently over 21 million living military veterans in the United States. More than 16 million of these served during times of war, while 5.5 million served during peacetime only. So this Veterans Day, don't forget to say thanks to some of the millions of men and women who have served our country.
My name is Jennifer Conti, and I'm the wife of a veteran. This is my husband, Joseph Conti, United States Marine Corps Reserve, 125 Charlie Company, stationed out of Plainville, Connecticut from 2003 to 2009, with 1 tour of active duty in Fallujah, Iraq in 2006. He is a combat vet. We met in high school, and it was magic. We were young and in love, and we felt the way that every young person feels when they're in love, like they're invincible, like they're on top of the world, like nobody's ever loved like this before. And we did. I think everybody deserves to feel that way once in their lives. Joe always had a dream of joining the Marines, and his dream came true. In 2003, he left for boot camp. He left me, and I was devastated. The deployments are harder on the families than they are on the Marines, without a doubt. The Marines are prepared for this, they've trained for this, they've wanted this, they've worked hard for this, they're ready for it. But the families are kind of thrust into it. It might not be how we've always imagined seeing ourselves. And for us, it's a waiting game. And if you've ever waited for anybody, you know how that feels. You look at the clock and it's only been 5 minutes. And they call and like, I lost track of time. And that's all you have to count. When Joe left for his deployment, I had no idea what to expect. I watched him disappear into the darkness until he was that big. And that was it. The next 7 months would be in my imagination. They left in October 2005 for Fallujah, Iraq. They were stationed in the heart of the city in the CMOC. Between there and outside the city in ECP-7, it was a checkpoint. And they did everything that you can imagine when you think of the war in Iraq. Raids, kicking down doors, checkpoints, security, missions, night vision, goggles, the Hearts and Minds campaign even, patrols, everything. And they didn't have internet, but they did have satellite phone. And he called from that phone once a week, and that was my proof of life. It was my everything that let me know that everything was okay. We also had First Sergeant Granger, who was the top of the chain of command for Charlie Company, and he had access to the internet because of his position and his duties. And he just so happened to be a very good writer. I don't think every unit gets this, but First Sergeant Granger kept a blog. And he posted on the blog once a day, maybe every second day, every third day, depending on the kind of week that they were having over there. And it was our lifeline. It was our direct wire to the men of Charlie Company, and it took away some of that mystery. And he let us know what was going on over there, and we let him know what was going on over here. And we supported each other through that. It was a source of information, it was a source of support for the families, and he had a section in the blog called The Corner, where families were writing in, kind of like an op-ed, where we just kind of expressed our feelings, and First Sergeant would post them and put them out there for everybody to read. And in that section, I was reading everybody's experiences, and I felt like somebody's was being left out, and that was of mine, of the girlfriend. And so I'd like to read it from The Corner. It says, The Forgotten One. First Sergeant says, "It was recently brought to my attention that someone has been forgotten in all of this. That is the same person that has been forgotten by countless over all of this, and on deployments past and present. This is the girlfriends. The Marine Corps constantly thinks of the mothers and the wives, but this one would be the girlfriend. Now you may well say guys go through girlfriends, but what about the one that has been by her Marine side for years? All wives were girlfriends at one time, weren't they? Weren't mothers somebody's girlfriend at one time also? So why do we discount them so easily? Why would they not care for their Marines just as much as anybody else then? I'm going to add an email minus the name of someone who can put it even better than I." And this would be my email. I said, "Dear First Sergeant Granger, I would like to take a moment of thank you for your blog. It sounds so simple, and I have never thought I would be so thankful for a simple blog. Never mind my newfound appreciation for the hard work of the USPS and everyone in Iraq that delivers mail. Never mind the dedication and consideration of the founders of Moto Mail. I am in awe. And honestly, and I don't know why, but I couldn't have imagined this much support during this time of deployment. I am really amazed. The whole while since last October, I envisioned this dark, scary, and horrible time while my Marine was away. I never thought that I would feel this positive, proud, and convinced that the United States Marine Corps is the best institution in the world. I'm a girlfriend of one of the Marines of Charlie Company, and honestly, I feel like sometimes we tend to get left in the dust as girlfriends. Because no, we're not married, and no, we're not mothers, but you know what? We stand behind our Marines 110%, just as much as anyone. No, we haven't shared a life of 20 years or more together, heck, not even 10. But at this fragile, youthful time of our lives, to be forced into a situation of pain and absence, we too are missing our Marines. We haven't yet experienced that blissful wedding day, saying our vows and dancing with our husbands for the first time. We don't yet have the joy of being called Mr. and Mrs. for the first time as we enter the reception while everyone applauds us. We only have the dream of such. which in my opinion only makes the waiting harder, because everything you've ever hoped for in your life is hanging on the balance. The day of homecoming is more than the return of the love of your life, but the realization of every single one of your hopes and dreams. It finally means that we can live out our goals and dreams and wait for our day in the spotlight. Bring them home safe, First Sergeant, but I just want you to know that we are out here, arm in arm, sister and sister. We are waiting and praying while reading your updates, feeling closer to our Marines. It is invaluable just hearing that everything is going okay, if at least for today, another day, one more closer to homecoming. Thank you, proud girlfriend of a Charlie Company Marine. And so I wrote that to him, and I forgot that I wrote that until now. And I read it, and I look around at my life, and I get the goosebumps, because I get to say that all my dreams came true. We got it. He came home, we got married, we had our first dance, we built our house, we had our baby, and when I'm feeling like complaining, or when I get complacent, because, you know, everything's relative, I have to stop and really remind myself that not everybody has this. Not everybody got to see their dreams come true. First Sergeant called the blog the Fallujah Current. He called it that because the Hartford Current was actually embedded with them for a short period of time while they were there in Fallujah. They reported back from the front lines. And in fact, one day we opened the newspaper, the front page of the newspaper, there's my husband, big picture, half the page, standing next to a blown out vehicle. And we're looking around at each other like, he told us it was a quiet week. We thought everything was going all right. And looking back on it, I can see that he was protecting us. He was still, even over there, thousands of miles away, trying to balance being a good Marine with still being a good son and a good brother and a good boyfriend. He was shielding us from things that no human should ever have to see. Things that took some men's lives. 11 Marines did not make it back from this deployment. 11 families are still waiting to see their Marine again. 11 families were not at homecoming to see the buses storming into Hartford with the lights and the full escort and the police and the motorcycles and the tow trucks going. When the whole world faded away and I saw him again, the best day of my life was their worst. And I want to read their names. Captain Brian S. Latondra, Captain John J. McKenna, Sergeant Matthew J. Fenton, Corporal Paul N. King, Corporal Jordan C. Pearson, Corporal Jared M. Shoemaker, Lance Corporal Kurt E. Deschen, Lance Corporal Michael D. Glover, Lance Corporal Eric P. Valdepenas, Lance Corporal Christopher B. Cosgrove III, and HM2 Christopher G. Walsh. Charlie Company came home on October 25th, 2016, and my husband was one of them. And 11 years later, I have to say that the battle continues, that war does not leave you. There is a quote that I read that says that in war there are no unwounded soldiers. And Joe still has his demons to fight. He still has things that won't leave him. And so I want to say that when you see a veteran, the greatest thing you can do is to thank them, because you get it. They need to know that what they did was important, that they did things that normal people can't do, that they're larger than life, and that when you meet them, it's like meeting a superhero, because they did some superhuman things. They've seen the worst that humanity has to offer, and they continue to live beautifully in spite of it. Our daughter is a testament to that. She's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my whole life. She was born on Veterans Day, actually, so I think that means something. And I want him to know that I love him very much. He is my daughter and my hero, and I admire him, and he's the bravest person that I know. Every time that I hear our national anthem, when we get to the end, when we say, "O'er the land of the free and the home of the brave," I think of him every time, and I'm so grateful. So happy Veterans Day, everybody, and God bless America.
Hi, so my name's Paul Coppola. I'm the assistant principal over at Madison Middle School. but I'm also the younger brother of Dr. Chris Coppola. He's currently a pediatric surgeon in Pennsylvania, but several years back he was in Iraq twice as an Air Force surgeon, and his experiences over in Balad were shared with his 3 sons and his wife through a series of letters that he was writing home, just to explain to them what, again, their father was doing in this war zone. So I actually brought the 2 books here. The first one is a compilation of letters, and then this is kind of a cleaned up version of those. He entitled it Made a Difference for that one, because what I learned from my brother in the war zone is that he's someone who's trained to save lives. And there's such a conflict where he was sent over to a place where there's all this senseless killing. And it was such a fascinating conflict internally for him, someone who pledged the Hippocratic Oath that he would save whoever it was that came to his operating room, to his table, whether it was your US Marines, whether it was the civilians caught in the war zone, whether it was the Iraqi police or military, whether it was an insurgent who was trying to kill the same Marines that were in the next room over. And so these were the stories that inspired him to say, in all this senseless killing, I'm trying to, save this one person, and that's my part I can do, so I can accept my role here. But also as someone who has always loved his country and felt like this was the right thing to do, to give back as an Air Force Lieutenant Colonel. I do want to read one excerpt because I think it tells a little bit about his experience there and a little of what I'm trying to share with everyone here today. So he says, with nothing else to do, we fight boredom by loitering in the hospital in the OR. The new team is busy. The recent offensive insurgency has made for an unfortunate rush of patients. Before I even scrub in to lend a hand, I see him, the Iraqi policeman on whom I completed my first operation in Balad 4 months ago. And just a little side note, he trained in Bridgeport, he trained locally at Yale. He said this first individual who came into the OR had 5 injuries. If you take any one of those injuries, that would have been the worst injury he had ever seen. And this individual had 5 of them. He has rallied well and is looking much healthier with a well-groomed beard and bright eyes. He is still too skinny, but is standing on his own 2 feet, smiling and strong. I can barely reconcile this image with the suffering, attenuated creature that hovered above the abyss for weeks on our ward. As I make my way toward him, my thoughts return to that first call night when medics rushed him into the OR, shot in the belly and bleeding to death, intestines hanging from a silver dollar-sized hole in his stomach. I was alert and excited and moving a mile a minute as I identified the source of bleeding and positioned the tissues for repair. General Surgeon Trevor, who was on his way out at the time, was relaxed as we worked together to keep the man alive. 3 months and many operations later, we released this man to an uncertain fate in one of the Iraqi hospitals. When he spots me, he shouts across the OR, "Doctor, doctor, morphine." He laughs at his own joke while the nurses gather around him. They have flocked to the clinic to see if this wisecracking funny man is really the same policeman from months before. For countless hours, they tended to his wounds and administered medications as he slowly crawled to recovery. Now many of the nurses have tears in their eyes. My mouth must be hanging open. I try to speak but can hardly utter a word. I embrace him, wondering how such a welcome surprise can even be possible. How did this happen? How have you gotten so strong, I ask him. As usual, I have the invaluable help of Qasim to translate. It is my mother. Remember, you told her that food was my most important medicine. She took you very seriously and is filling me every day. Well, you must tell her that I thank her. She has done more good for you than all of us. One by one, he turns to each doctor and nurse, looking us squarely in the eye and speaking with immense gratitude. I know that I would be dead if it wasn't for you Americans. I want to thank you. Have you returned to work, I ask. I'm not strong enough yet, but I'm walking every day. I want to get my job back. Your country is very lucky to have a man like you. We embrace again, and I wish him good fortune. I continue seeing patients in clinic and catch up with many of the kids we have treated in the past few weeks. So, I just really like that passage because it helps me to process, again, that conflict that my brother described and how he made a difference for that man. And as a veteran, and really all veterans, as much as they're thrown into an environment of conflict and hate and death, there is something positive that can come out of some of the missions that we're accomplishing. So I am so honored to be part of this project and really to honor all veterans, including my brother, and I thank you on Veterans Day.
When I look into your eyes, it's like watching the night sky, or a beautiful sunrise. Well, there's so much they hold, and just like them old stars, I see that you've come so far to be right where you are. How old is your soul? Well, I won't give up on us, even if the skies get rough. I'm giving you all my love. I'm still looking up when you're needing your space to do some navigating. I'll be here patiently waiting to see what you find. Even the stars, they burn. Some even fall to the earth. We got a lot to learn. God knows we're worth it. No, I won't give up. I don't want to be someone who walks away so easily. I'm here to stay and make the difference that I can make. Our differences, they do a lot to teach us how to use the tools and gifts we got here. We got a lot at stake. And in the end, you're still my friend. At least we did intend for us to work. We didn't break, we didn't burn. We had to learn how to bend without the world caving in. I had to learn what I got and what I'm not, and who I am. I won't give up on us, even if the skies get rough. I'm giving you all my love. I'm still looking up, still looking up. Well, I won't give up on us. God knows I'm tough.
Hi, Daddy. Hi, girls. I miss you, Daddy. I love you, Daddy. Can't wait to see you. Happy birthday, Dad.
All I want is nothing more, to hear you knocking at my door.
Now I'm built a home. I miss you, Daddy, and I hope you could come home soon. Went to the doctors. Found out we're having another girl. Take a look at face for Daddy.
When you said your last goodbye, I died a little bit inside. I lay in tears.
Good night, Dad.
all night.
Good night, honey. Love you. Mwah.
If you had a wish today, what would your wish be?
That my dad could be here.
Our sons are doing what they need to do to protect the country.
You don't realize the sacrifices that you guys make it. You sacrifice your friends that you grew up with, and especially getting to be home with your family. My tour is almost over, and I'll see you real soon.
How about if you turn around?
When is he coming home?
Hopefully a week.
Today, coming in last night from Afghanistan.
She hasn't seen her son in a year and a half.
Boys, we have a very special treat for you as well.
I'm staring out into the night, trying to hide the pain. Going to the place where love and feeling good don't ever cost a thing. And the pain you feel's a different kind of pain. I'm going home, back to the place where I belong, and where your love has always been enough for me. When I'm running from, I know I think you got me all wrong, but don't regret this life just for me. Well, these places and these faces are getting old, so I'm going home.
Oh my God. What? Turn around.
Please welcome home your son, Lieutenant Charles Draco.
Oh, Daddy!
The miles are getting longer, it seems. The closer I get to you. And I've always been the best man, a friend for you, but your love remains true. And I don't know why. You always seem to give me another try. So I'm going home, to the place where I belong, and where your love has always
Hi, buddy.
I miss you.
I miss you too.
Con los terroristas.
Then do the Harlem Shake.
Con los terroristas.
I voluntarily enlisted, even though I had a full scholarship. I decided my country was more important than me going to college.
I brought a platoon picture of what all of us young, good-looking guys looked like back then.
It's been 36 years since the last combat units came off the line and came home.
When I landed at the San Francisco airport, I was spit on. I was called a baby killer.
Well, it hurt everybody's feelings. People were against the war, so they were against us, basically.
And I couldn't never understand that.
So I went in the men's room, took off my uniform, threw it in a garbage can, and put on civilian clothes to wear the rest of the way home.
And all we were doing is a job that we were asked to do.
We don't hold it against American people.
I was not one of these guys that wore fatigues or wore t-shirts or anything like that after Vietnam. I just figured that was a chapter in my life that was over.
You all know that during the Vietnam War, the troops returned home during the course of the war individually. There are many people who never had the opportunity to let them know how they felt. It is therefore my distinct honor to offer you a long overdue welcome home to the United States of America after each of you well and faithfully served our great nation overseas.
I didn't get it when I got back. I didn't get there.
Our troops went through a lot when they came back, and it was undeserved. It truly was. But that's ancient history, and the important thing today is they're being recognized for what they did. They're being welcomed back as patriots and soldiers and men who went and did their duty. And that's what it was all about.
It feels good, but it hurts. Because there's a lot of guys that should be here that aren't.
I lost a lot of friends.
The veterans who were not able to be here, I'm sure that they're watching from up above, but the ones who can't receive the thank yous and the applause, that's what hurts.
Today we honor these servants of yours.
I feel for them, even though, as I say, we're quite different since none of them was drafted.
and they all did volunteer. But once you get there, I guess that difference evaporates. So they basically have to do the same thing I did, and basically for the same reasons, too. I mean, you get them off base and get them a beer and something. They might talk about the flag and Mom and apple pie and so forth. But that's not what it's about. It's about killing the enemy and get him first. You know, get him hard, get him first, and then go home. That's what it's about.
You don't wake up in the morning and go, I'm going to go whack him. That's not there. And there's no sense of, for me and for a lot of people I knew, you didn't wake up in the morning and go, I'm going to go bring freedom. That wasn't your life. Your life was, I'm going to have to get in that Humvee or that tank and roll out there and not die.
You're afraid a lot when you're in this situation, and fear does not bring out the best in us. It brings out a lot of ugliness, and you really hate the people who make you feel afraid because you're ashamed of being afraid. And you become a racist because you simply see them as a mass, a dangerous mass. To some extent, you almost have to see them that way for your own protection.
There's a lot of Haji this and Haji that. Anything that's Arabic in Iraq, you know, it's Haji. You start to think that you and the guys around you are competent and alert, and you're going to take care of what situation arises. And you get kind of aggressive. I mean, somebody makes a wrong move and they have a machine gun swung on them. War is a passage, whether you live or whether you die. If you undergo a change that significant, it's a story you feel like you have to tell in a way. I'm not psychologically trained or even inclined, but, you know, maybe that was my therapy in a way. The way to give some of this away.
I never heard the boom, crunch, only imagined it later. There was strong braking, followed by a great deal of shouting. Our striker moaned through its monstrous air brakes and then bumped, heaved, and finally ground itself to a halt.
6-7's in the ditch. They roll it. No, they're out. I think they're disabled. Colonel's vehicle okay.
The major said that we would need a combat lifesaver. Well, it wasn't combat. There were no lives left to save. But we dug out the CLS bag, because you never know, do you? And walked across a pitch-dark highway. Somebody was wailing in Arabic, hypnotically, repetitiously. A single car headlight was burning, a single shaft of light beaming across the road like an accusing finger. When tactical spotlights suddenly illuminated the little car, we found the source of the wailing. He was an older man, wearing a silver beard, a monumental red-veined nose, and a big, thick wool overcoat. He was hopping like a dervish, bowing rapidly from the waist and throwing his arms to the sky, then to his knees, over and over again in a kind of elaborate dance of grief. It's hard to describe the contents of the car. They had been a man only moments earlier that night. A cop or a fireman or a soldier would have simply said, "It's a mess in there." I used to be a fireman. I'm a soldier now. It was as bad a mess as I've seen. I squeezed into the crumpled passenger area, sat on the shattered glass, and tried to take the pulse from his passenger side arm. Nothing. And his neck. Nothing. I thought about CPR, but only for a moment. His left arm was mostly torn off, and the left side of his head was flattened. Up on the highway, GIs walked around, gave and took orders. And by the car, the victim's father still capered madly, throwing his arms around, crying out to God or anyone. I asked him, in my own language, to come with me, to calm down, to let me help him. We moved him into the striker, assuring him that no, we weren't arresting him, but he didn't care. Whenever he started to calm down, he would look toward the car, break into wails. 40 minutes later, a medic arrived. While the medic worked on him, the colonel's interpreter came over and fired a few questions at the man. It sounded like an interrogation. They'd been on their way back to Sinjar, just a few miles away. The younger man had been taking his father back from shopping. They were minutes from home. The young man had been a student. Engineering. With honors. The pride of the family. What we like to think of as Iraq's future. Finally, I had to ask, what does he keep saying? The Terp looked at me, disgusted, resigned, or maybe just plain tired. He says to kill him now. I walked away in Little Galwaz. A sergeant came up next to me, smoking. I didn't say anything. After a few moments in the black quiet, I overheard him say, "It wasn't anyone's fault. It was just an accident." I know. Inhale. Cherry glow. Long exhale. Why we gotta drive in black out here, I don't get. If 6-7 turned their lights on a couple seconds earlier. Yeah, I know. And he went to help carry the young man's remains into the sudden light show of ambulances and police jeeps, surrounded by young Arabic men with steely eyes. I went and sat on the back gate of the Stryker. I felt the cold creep into me. The old man sat next to me, perhaps too tired to continue his tirade against cruel fate, careless Americans, war and its accidents. I haven't lost a full-grown son, just a little daughter, a baby, and she wasn't torn from me in a terror of rending steel, stamped out by a sudden monster roaring out of the night. She went so quietly that her passing never woke her mother. I like to think she kissed her on the way out, on her way home. But still, sitting on the steel tail of that monster that killed his son, I think maybe I knew just how one Iraqi man felt. Just kill me now. We sat and looked straight into the lights.
I never thought of that guy as Haji. He was a man who lost his son, and I couldn't avoid... I didn't even think of the comparisons when I was first writing it, but I just knew that I had to write something about that.